let Ms. Linehan swear anybody in who's going to provide testimony, and then defer any further action on that until the 3rd, and then open up the 3rd public hearing. We can get people sworn in, and then we can go back and complete those public hearings, just so that we don't have to keep her too long. And that'll be legally sufficient, but...
Just for clarity, you're recommending that we swear everybody in who needs to be sworn in at the first opportunity?
Well, I'd ask you to open the first public hearing.
Right.
And swear anyone in who's going to provide testimony in reference to that matter, and then hold the conclusion of that public hearing in abeyance, and then open the 3rd public hearing, which is also a quasi-judicial. And I apologize, I don't think I was very clear about that.
No, I understand.
And I appreciate, again, we're kind of juggling a few things,
Right.
so, but it's important to get that testimony under oath.
And there are no interveners present, or are there? None.
Pete, no interview?
No, sir.
Okay, all right, okay.
So I'd like to call this meeting to order. We do have a quorum. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the last March 5th meeting?
So moved.
A second?
Motion, second, all in favor?
I'll second it.
Okay, there's already a second. Thank you. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All right.
And Mr. Chairman, if we could ask the motion makers as well, Ms. Johnston, who is sitting there, is also, she's new and filling in. She's been longtime member of the Growth Management Department staff, but she may not recognize your voices as well as others, so if you all just could announce.
Yes,
So
motion by Joe
made the
Flanagan.
motion, and Scott Watson seconded.
Thank you. Thanks.
So the first piece of quasi-judicial procedures today is QJP. It's a quasi-judicial, I'm sorry, this is a Whitetail Solar Energy Center. This is F110-002. It's a solar energy center major final site plan for Florida Power and Light's request for an approval for the construction of an unmanned 74.5 megawatt photovoltaic solar energy facility on approximately 600 acres, which is the north half of a larger 1,261 acre tract. Included with this application is a request for a certificate of public facilities reservation. It will be, it's been requested by Morris Crady of Lucido Associates and will be presented by Peter Walden. I have no ex parte communications to divulge on this one.
None.
None.
And Mr. Foley?
I have none. I have none.
And then moving forward, we're going to pause on this one and
No,
We'll go ahead and swear anyone in who's going
swear
to...
anyone in for
Yes,
this
for
one
this one,
and
yes.
the third.
First, we'll conclude this first.
Okay.
We'll take care of this first.
Okay.
Okay, so before you proceed, well, if, Mr. Chair, if you
Yeah.
all would agree to hold this public hearing in abeyance, and then we'll move on to the 3rd public hearing.
I would entertain a motion to hold this item in abeyance and start the 3rd piece of our agenda, which is Comprehensive Plan Amendment 19-25 Hobe Sound. It's a public hearing to consider the zoning change, and it is a quasi-judicial hearing, so we need to have all those people who will be witnesses or testimonies for that to stand
And this is NPH3, correct?
NPH3, correct.
Correct, yes. Okay.
Yeah, we need I'll
Yeah,
so
we
moved
need a
on the
motion.
motion, Scott Watson. Yeah.
Scott Watson made the motion.
Joe Flanagan, second.
Don Foley. Aye.
The rest of you in it?
So we're
Aye.
all in
Aye,
favor.
aye.
I'm sorry. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
So I would move or request that we move back to the original number 1 agenda item, QJP-1, sorry, NPH1, Whitetail Solar Energy Center.
So moved, Scott Watson.
Second, Joe Flanagan.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Unanimous.
Aye. You guys can hear me okay, right?
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Peter,
set
would
to
you
go?
like to? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everyone. Peter Walden with the Growth Management Department. I'd like to start by saying that the agenda item and a full agenda item and a copy of my work history have been submitted for the record as Exhibit 1. And this is an application for a major development final site plan. Florida Power and Light Company, FPL, is proposing the construction of an unmanned 74.5 megawatt photovoltaic solar energy facility, solar farm, on an approximately site of Citrus Boulevard, about 8 miles southwest of Florida's Turnpike. Included is a request for a certificate of public facilities reservation. The subject site consists of approximately 600 acres, which is the north half of a larger 1,261-acre tract. The property has been actively farmed for several decades and contains no natural wetlands or upland native habitat. The subject property and parent tract have a land use designation of agricultural and a zoning district designation of A2. The surrounding properties are also designated agricultural and zoned A2. The property is bordered along the west by the South Florida Water Management District C44 stormwater treatment area, and there are no residential uses or public roads adjacent to the property. The access for the property will be via an improved service path through the front 600 acres. The front parcel will remain in agricultural production. The site is outside of the urban services boundary, and no water or sewer service is planned with the development. The development review staff have reviewed the application and find it's in compliance with the applicable zoning, land use, and Martin County land development regulations. There are no unresolved issues associated with the application. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the FPL Whitetail Solar Energy Facility project. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
I have none for Peter, but I may have some for the applicant. Do you have any questions?
None.
Mr. Foley? Any questions for staff? Do not. Morris?
I'm sorry, you're on mute. No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Good evening. Morris Crady with Aceto and Associates here on behalf of the applicant, which is FPL. I do have the notice of the proof of notice to surrounding property owners. I'll put them over here on the seat. These are trying times, and I before I get into anything, I wanted to, on behalf of FPNL and me, thank the board members for being here tonight. I know you guys are volunteers, and it's a tremendous service you're providing to the county, and we thank you for trying to keep the county open and continue to do business in a safe and secure way that we're doing it. We were here about 2 years ago with the first FPL solar facility that's not part of the plant out at on Alapata Road and just north of Indiantown. And I don't know if you've been by there lately, but it's done. And you know, that was a challenging project because we had wetlands on site and adjacent residential uses, and we had to jump through some unique hoops. But it's a great use on the property. The wetlands are being restored, and they're doing a great job out there. I don't think FPL could have picked a more remote location than this location. I don't know if you can go to the on the staff report, one of the aerials or location map. But this is literally in the middle of nowhere. Where the closest residential area is about 2 miles to the south on the other side of the St. Lucie Canal. And we're surrounded by the C44 reservoir, which is a stormwater treatment area on the west side. And I think that's a water farm. The green area on the east side, that's a water farm that I think is operated by South Florida Water Management District as well. So our surrounding property owners were limited to about 3, and 2 of them were South Florida Water Management and FPL. So we had no issues with, obviously, any kind of concerns from surrounding property owners. And we're very much in support of staff recommendations. This is one of the few projects that we were able to get through the staff review in one review period, so we're very proud of that.
For me, anyway.
And hopefully that will continue. But we are here tonight in support of in agreement with staff recommendation of approval, and we'll hope that you will carry this forward to the commission meeting, which is the notice included notice of that meeting as well, which is April, I think, 19th, the county commission meeting.
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
yeah, okay. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. That's all I have, though.
Any questions for Morris? Morris, I have a question, and it's a similar question that I've asked you before about and this one, the engineering and environmental survey was really fairly intensive, and I appreciate it. But there seems to be a consistent idea that there will remain sheet flow across these properties after they're covered with an impervious covering above the ground. And I wonder if that's really true, whether, having a shelf that is impervious will create ditches and runnels underneath it. And I'm not sure that actually consistently retains its sheet flow capacity. The ground that's underneath these pads is going to dry out and won't be as absorbent. And I'm not sure that really considering them to be permanently sheet flow is actually accurate. Has there been any studies on the current FPL sites that are already being used?
They're working, yeah, they're using that.
What happens to the groundwater? What happens to the runoff from rainfall on those properties?
It goes into usually ditches and swells.
Right.
Like in this case, they're actually using the existing system that was set up for the citrus production. So there's everywhere you see there's a canal or a drainage swell
Right,
system
but
that
you
takes
no
the
longer
water.
have the evapotranspirative capacity of the field.
Actually, that's not necessarily true. Each row of solar cells, solar array, is tilted, and the ground is open underneath each one of them. So the water does run off on each individual panel fairly consistently throughout the whole farm. So we treat these farms as total open space where the solar array is because of that. And I think it's been demonstrated that the evaporation and the soil treatment and everything is very consistent throughout because the water is channeled individually between these arrays.
Yeah, the water still makes it to the ground. There's no doubt about it. It's not like a rooftop.
It's not trying to go from one end of this whole area
Yeah.
to the other. It is going in between each one of these arrays.
Yeah.
Each array is tilted in the same angle.
Correct.
Yep.
And so you end up with basically a shed roof that deposits that whole square footage into a relatively narrow ditch, which forms and runnels over time, that then leads to the ditch that conveys that water to whatever storage facility it has. And I think that's not dissimilar to the old row crop systems that were there, for citrus, but you do have a much less evaporative transpirative system because you no longer have the vegetation there. And I just don't know whether it actually qualifies as sheet flow any longer.
Well, grass area and vegetation is maintained in between and all around these cells. They actually have to go out and maintain them for that.
I mean, I think it's better than forests of Brazilian pepper, and it's certainly a great way to have, solar collection out there. And I'm not in any way trying to stand in front of it. I'm just not certain that we're actually achieving sheet flow in these areas that at some point did have sheet flow crossing them, but haven't since citrus became the predominant crop.
I don't know if there's ever sheet flow. I know there is pass-through drainage that comes from off-site, So, we have to account for the off-site drainage going through this site. But I'm not sure if it was ever sheep flow, because, when there was crops there, it was
Right, it
rows.
was drained.
Yeah, and I think they're maintaining that same type of operation. But I don't know specifically how to answer your question, but I know what they built so far has been working under those conditions. And with every project, there's maintenance. They do have to mow the grass. They do have to maintain those swells.
And there hasn't been any erosion on the two sites that have been built so far?
No,
Okay,
no. And even in St. Lucie County, where they've been operating for a few years now.
okay, thanks.
Mhm.
That was the question, I'm sorry, that was just having too much time to read the whole document.
No problem.
And I apologize. Morris offered to have their engineer here, and I told him that I did not think it was going to be required, so I apologize for that. I'll make sure he's at the BCC meeting to maybe address that.
I'm just curious. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions, any other questions?
No.
Okay.
Don? I'm in.
Don, did you have a
No.
question?
Did you hear me? No, thank you.
There's no members of the public that wish to comment on this, I don't think. Is your presentation complete?
Yes.
Okay. Here for deliberation, motions?
I'll make a motion that we move for staff approval, or staff's
Scott Watson
recommendation.
makes a motion for approval of staff's recommendation.
I was going to see if Don wanted to get a second in there before on our 2-second delay.
Don, do you have
I'll
any?
second it if you got it.
Don Foley is going to second that motion for staff's recommendation. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
Be safe.
You too. Thank you, Morris.
Okay.
So the second item on today's agenda, I have to move the chairs around a little bit.
Original, I don't know if I could backtrack from what I had up.
You
Spinning.
figure everybody in the world's online at the same time. Everything's going to be slow.
Here, maybe. I didn't know how the agenda, your agenda.
Are you just waiting for me, Mr. Chairman?
But are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. The second item on our agenda tonight is NPH-2. It's a comprehensive plan amendment, 19-25 for Hobe Sound. It's a public hearing to consider the amendment for the future land use map regarding the Hobe Sound Community Redevelopment Area. It's been requested by the Community Development Manager, Susan Kors, and Irene Settlemeyer will be ably presenting to us for the county. Irene, take it away.
Good evening, members of the local planning agency. Irene Settlemeyer, Principal Planner with the Growth Management Department. So on the screen is the location map of the Hobe Sound CRA. I think we're mostly all familiar with where it is located. Boundaries indicated there in black. Now, where's my other? So on the screen before you currently is the map on the left, the current future land use map in the Hobe Sound CRA vicinity, and on the right is the proposed future land use map for the Hobe Sound CRA. These maps appear in the staff report on page 11 and page 13. So you can see on the left I'm going to be creative with the colors, the marigold or goldenrod yellow, which is the low-density residential future land use, is a predominant future land use surrounding the Hobe Sound CRA and the Zeus Park neighborhood and the Banner Lake neighborhood. We have pale coral, which is a state-density future land use, which there's some of that is in the CRA, but it's also surrounding. And we have this turquoise blue is general institutional. The dark green, up here, Doc Myers Park, that's recreational future land use. The brighter green, there's a little bit in the Hobe Sound CRA down here, which is public conservation. There's a big swath of it outside of the CRA. And then the purple, we have the palest purple is the general commercial future land use. The violet color is limited commercial future land use, and the bluish purple is commercial office residential. And the pink is mobile home future land use. On the right, it's a bit simplified. We have the Café au Lait is the CRA neighborhood. That's the brownish color. And the pink were rose. The rose color is the proposed CRA center future land use designation. We've carried forward the recreational, the general institutional, and the public conservation. We were proposing to expand the public conservation. There's some acreage in the CRA that is also within the Nathaniel Reed Hobe Sound National Wildlife Refuge. We're proposing that this 12, about 8 acres, this 8 acres of high-density residential future land use, you can see it's on the old map, it's in the new map, that will remain. That 8 acres is part of a larger, I believe, 12-acre parcel, half in the CRA, half out of the CRA, and it's governed by a planned unit development zoning agreement. The estate density residential future land use is proposed to be retained for the Shellbridge subdivision because that 26 or 27 acres is the subject of an approved final site plan. So rather than try to confuse things with the new Hobe Sound redevelopment zoning district, which anyway, we're keeping the future land use, and you'll see when our next presentation will show how the zoning remains the same. So a quick recap. In September, about 6 months ago, the Board of County Commissioners adopted a new chapter of the Comprehensive Plan, Chapter 18, and that chapter includes the creation of 2 new future land use designations, CRA Center and CRA Neighborhood. The CRA Center future land use is designated to the former mixed-use future land use overlays and to other areas with commercial future land uses where mixed uses exist or are allowed. And the primary change between the mixed-use future land use overlay and the CRA Center future land use designation is that the CRA Center future land use designation recognizes mixed-use development patterns as well as mixed-use projects. So a mixed-use development pattern is where there's a diversity of compatible uses located within walking distance of each other, whereas a mixed-use project is planned, approved, and constructed as a single project and contains both residential and commercial components. Under the current scheme with the mixed-use future land use overlay and then the permission that mixed use can occur in commercial future land use areas outside of the mixed-use future land use overlay, only mixed-use projects are recognized as deserving of any special treatment. And we, as was recognized by the board in creating, in going to this scheme, that we don't need every project to be mixed use. We want a mix of uses within walking distance of each other. So the future land use map has been amended to assign the CRA Center future land use designation and the CRA Neighborhood future land use designation for Jensen Beach, for Old Palm City, and for Rio. Rio shows that the commercial, marine waterfront commercial future land uses are being retained and the industrial future land uses are being retained. Hobe Sound has no industrial future land use designations or marine waterfront commercial future land use designations. So the institutional future land uses, which are also being retained, they're being slightly expanded in the proposed future land use map. The site where the Hobe Sound, I don't know if you can see the cursor. I can't see it on the screen. Can you?
Yes.
Okay, so you can see it up there better than, so anyway, the location of the Hobe Sound Civic Center is slightly expanded. Currently, some of it is general institutional. We've expanded it to include the whole parcel that's owned by the county. We're recommending general institutional for the property across the street that's owned by South Martin Regional Utilities. The general institutional future land use designation is expanded a little bit here in property owned by the Pine School. Over here you can see it has the low density residential future land use. It's all owned by the Pine School and we're recommending it have the same future land use designation. Public conservation, I already mentioned, is being expanded here to include the land that's owned by us, the citizens of the United States of America, via the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. That's the Nathaniel Reed Hobe Sound National Wildlife Refuge. And then there's some small pocket parks, 4 pocket parks in the Zeus Park neighborhood that total a half an acre. We've taken the low-density residential future land use designation off of them and given them the recreational future land use designation. The estate density is being retained, as I mentioned, for the Shellbridge subdivision. There's a final site plan on those 27 acres, and then the high-density residential is being retained for that land within the CRA that's governed by a PUD. So the pinkish color, the reddish color, is the CRA Center future land use designation. And I will bring up this is the existing Hobe Sound mixed-use future land use overlay. And you can see that the CRA Center is a bit expanded. We've expanded the CRA Center future land use designation to include the entire 17-acre Winn-Dixie site. Currently, that property is not in the mixed-use future land use overlay at all. But we've also included the other properties with commercial future land use designations that go up between A1A Dixie Highway and Federal Highway. And they all have commercial future land uses, and we are proposing that they be within the CRA Center future land use designation. Currently, all the commercial future land use designations, whether they're in the mixed use overlay or outside the mixed use overlay, are permitted to have mixed use development. So because along Bridge Road, these properties south of Bridge Road have limited commercial future land use, so we're recommending that it be CRA Center. And these properties going up US 1 also have commercial future land use designations, so we're recommending CRA Center. Again, in the next presentation, you'll see how future land, some development standards and permitted uses will vary depending on the zoning sub-district that these properties are placed in. So there's a couple places that I want to point out, like, again, along US 1, the CRA Center generally tracks the general commercial, limited commercial, and commercial office residential future land use designations. Now there's the pink area on the existing map, as I mentioned, is the mobile home future land use designation. And there is a parcel that is north of Church, so it's right here. Well, it might be a couple parcels. It's a couple parcels. But there's a land area in here that has the mobile home future land use designation that we are recommending becomes CRA Center future land use designation. So this property is bookcased, or what is it called? Bookend, thank you. Bookended with a general commercial on each side. And while it has the mobile home future land use designation, the existing uses in there now are on the west, outside of the general commercial future land use. In the mobile home future land use, there's a mix of small commercial uses, I think 3 or 4 buildings. There are 2 multi-family residential developments, both of them about 45 years old. And then there's a place of worship in the middle that is basically, it's an underutilized lot. The place of worship occupies a very small portion of the land. So we believe that this property here represents a potential redevelopment site, and we believed that the CRA Center future land use designation, which allows a mix of uses, would be most appropriate for that. I want to point out that other areas that have the mobile home future land use designation now are going to become the CRA neighborhood. So I know these maps are really small, but I thought it was helpful to look at them side by side. So I believe this property here, I believe, is the Hobe Sound, Hobe Village. The Hobe Village Mobile Home Park. It's under single ownership. We've put it in the CRA neighborhood. Then we have the Woodbridge Mobile Home Park and the Seabreeze Mobile Home Park, and they are placed in the CRA neighborhood. On the west side of US 1, there is the Hobe Sound Mobile Home Park. There's Lakeside Mobile Home Co-op, and these lots up here, which Fairchild, Arance, Wagon Trail, Cactus Trail, those are the names of the streets. They currently have mobile home future land use, and we have placed them in the CRA neighborhood future land use. So that concludes my presentation. Your interest and attention is much appreciated. I am happy to answer any questions that you have, and staff recommends that the local planning agency recommend that the Board of County Commissioners approve this comp plan amendment, which is an amendment of the future land use map regarding the Hobe Sound CRA. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Irene. Any questions for staff?
I've got one.
Covered everything, the questions that I have.
The CRA neighborhood versus the mobile home park future land use map designation. Refresh my memory, the CRA neighborhood allows what density?
Well, remember, this is the future land use designation, and then there's going to be a zoning district
Right.
and a zoning sub-district placed on it. But the CRA neighborhood future land use designation permits up to 10 dwelling units per acre unless a lesser amount is provided for in the land development regulations.
So it's a pretty good trade-off then between mobile home park. You know, if you had, I know that one mobile home park is, gosh, it's less than an acre, I think, and it's got 20 units on our 20 mobile home parks. At some point, they could convert that and make it work from a financial standpoint, I would imagine, maybe.
There is in the next agenda
Oh, okay.
item. In the regulating plan, one of the sub-districts is mobile home. And there is some density and different requirements that will apply in the mobile home zoning sub-district.
I mean, one of the phrases that's being used in this report, and I hadn't seen it before, and maybe it's just that I overlooked it previously, but it talks about incremental increases in density. And
Intensity.
I'm a little bit concerned about the phraseology there, because incremental to me implies change over time. And I'm not
Well,
sure
how I
that's
used
really-
it, how I meant incremental is it's not a drastic change, but there's some small increases. So, for example, in the CRA neighborhood, the future land use designation permits up to 10 dwelling
Right.
units an acre. In the medium density residential future land use, up to 5 dwelling units. Excuse me, up to 8.
8, yeah.
8 dwelling units are permitted. Again, though, these are the future land use designations, and I believe this may be one situation where the comprehensive plan actually may be a little more lenient than the regulations that get adopted. Not in all cases, but just because the Zeus Park neighborhood is in the CRA neighborhood future land use designation, and this area over here is in the CRA neighborhood future land use designation, it doesn't mean that they will be permitted to have 10 dwelling units an acre. And with regard to the intensity of development, how there's been, what I am calling incremental, meaning not slowly over time, well, but it's not a drastic change, is that in the CRA Center future land use designation, you are permitted to have up to 15 dwelling units an acre. That is the same as is permitted in a mixed-use development that occurs on those properties.
Right.
One of the differences, so 15 dwelling units an acre now, if you do a mixed-use development on any of this general commercial, limited commercial, or core. 15 dwelling units an acre if you do a development in the CRA Center. Now, again, depending on the zoning subdistrict that's assigned. So now you would be able to do 15 dwelling units an acre on a strictly residential project. You don't have to do a mixed-use project because we're trying to achieve a mixed-use neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Similarly, when you're outside the mixed-use overlay now, the lot coverage and the minimum open space are governed by the underlying future land use designation. So if we look, for example, at this here, where we have a general commercial right next to core. So the general commercial right next to core. On this general commercial, you're allowed to have up to 80% building and, well, you're only required to have 20% open space. But on core, you're required to have 40% open space. Under the CRA Center, those will be treated the same. This little parcel here will have the same ability, and we went with the more generous, to encourage development with the 20% minimum open space in the CRA Center.
Okay. Appreciate that. Are there any other questions for staff? Foley?
This is Don Foley. I do not have any questions, but I want to thank Irene for explaining the dwelling units per acre. That answered my questions. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Any members of the public? Is there going to be a presentation, or is that just staff's presentation for?
Staff's presentation.
Okay, future land use.
Yes. One of the things never mind. This comes up in the next agenda item. Next agenda item.
Right. Oh, I think we'll have plenty of time to talk about zoning issues and density issues. Anybody want to make a recommendation for
I'll
motion?
make a motion for staff's recommendation for approval.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion by Scott Watson and a second by Mr. Flanagan. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, members of the local
Thank
planning
you, Irene.
agency.
And thank you, CRA people, for working so hard on getting the language.
Opening for Dana.
You can touch
Kind
it.
of defeats the purpose, doesn't it?
I think you're better off if you touch it.
Yeah, right, that's right, it's at the end.
Thank you for doing that. Anyway.
Problem.
It's okay, the school board will just give you a new one.
That's right, okay.
We need a new,
We've got a few later on.
Oh, it's working. So sorry. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members.
Do you want me to introduce you?
Yes, please.
Okay. This is also a quasi-judicial hearing, so I have no ex parte communications to divulge on this one.
None.
No.
And everybody has been sworn in. This is NPH-3, a public hearing to consider the creation of Division 5 Hobe Sound Community Redevelopment Code of Article 12 Redevelopment Code, Land Development Regulations, and amending the zoning atlas to assign the Hobe Sound Redevelopment Zoning District a nation. It's been requested by Susan Kors, the Community Redevelopment Manager, and will be presented to us by the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening again, members. I'm Susan Kors, for the record, Manager of the Office of Community Development, and we are bringing for your consideration tonight an item that reviews both the proposed Article 12 Division 5 Hobe Sound Redevelopment Code Land Development Regulations and the proposed amendment of the zoning atlas to assign the Hobe Sound Redevelopment Zoning District. The complete agenda item has already been submitted, so I am going to add documentation of public notice and my work history for the record. Also, just to let you know, the public was notified via community signage and advertisement in the paper. We sent out 2,771 letters to the residents and businesses, property owners in the Hobe Sound CRA, and 1,000 feet outside the boundary.
1,000 miles.
We really went all out.
really
here.
loaded
I mean,
mail.
you know.
Saw the airplane banner flying over.
So tonight's presentation is brought to you by Mr. Dana Little, Urban Design Director of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. Dana?
Thank you, Ms. Kors.
Good evening. Dana Little with Treasure Coast. Susan and I are going to try to work together on this one since we don't have a clicker this evening. If you go to the next slide, please. I'm going to give you a little bit of background. You've seen some of these slides before, but just as a refresher, we haven't seen you in a while. Efforts to date, we started this effort back in August of 2018. Next slide, please. And to date, we've had 30 public meetings, 17 of which have been evening meetings, and we've conducted over 100 interviews with residents, community members, board members, et cetera, and we've actually interviewed all of you. This is our overall project schedule. Next slide, please. We were really moving along well until 2 weeks ago. And as an example, we were supposed to go to the CRA board on Monday, and that meeting was canceled. So Krista was able to, working with staff, confirm that we don't have to go in that order, CRA board and then the LPA. Next slide, please. And this is our adoption schedule. You notice we've highlighted, actually, that's incorrect. It should be April 2nd, sorry, below. March 11th, you'll see it's colored green there. That was when we went to the NAC. And I'm going to the NAC for the second time, and I'm going to go into some detail this evening about our conversations with them and some of the analysis that we've done and some of the recommendations from that meeting. And what was circled, I'm sorry, is March 23rd, which was when we were supposed to go to the CRA board. Next slide. So in general, Irene just presented to you the future land use map and the new designations for CRA Center, CRA Neighborhood. That effectively removes the overlay, the mixed-use overlay, which has caused some real confusion over the years. You'll recall one of the fundamental issues that we're trying to address is these overlays. And there's some antiquated zoning districts, and then with overlays on top, and it becomes very difficult to really understand what somebody can do with their property or really have any predictability going forward. So what we're doing, and you've seen this when we presented Jensen Beach and Rio, as well as Old Palm City, that we're rezoning the entire CRA area to a single category, which would be the Hobe Sound CRA. And then within that, on the regulating plan that I'll go into some detail on, we've got a whole series of sub-districts which establish the densities, the intensities, and the building typologies that we're recommending. Next slide. All of this, next slide please, is still rooted in the original CRA vision plans. And just a reminder, there are two key components to this overall element. Number one is Irene mentioned the creation of Chapter 18, which is a new chapter within the Comprehensive Growth Management Plan, which is dedicated to specifically the CRAs. And then the companion document to that, or article, if you will, is Article 12, which is within the land development regulations, which also is dedicated to the CRA. So the hope is that going forward, it's almost a one-stop shop for someone who's looking to see what they can do within the CRAs in terms of development and redevelopment. Next slide, please. Next slide. This was adopted, the Chapter 18 was adopted at the second public hearing back in September of last year. So that enabled the creation of the different divisions or the CRAs for the Article 12. Next slide. So what we did effectively is, as you just saw in Irene's presentation, the two maps to the left identify the existing future land use, or it was, what still is, the existing future land use map and the overlay areas. And we've compressed it into the map that you see on the right by simplifying a lot of the residential and commercial districts into CRA Center and CRA Neighborhood. Next slide, please. So in the companion piece, which is Article 12, in the land development regulations, as I said, that creates the new sub-districts that are reflected in the regulating plan. Next slide. And this was also adopted back in September of last year. Next slide, please. So similarly to the future land use map, on the left side, you see the current zoning maps with the current zoning districts and the zoning overlay district, which is the mixed-use overlay there along Bridge and Dixie. And then the proposed zoning map is the one on the right, where everything is blue, and then the, the recreational districts, public conservation districts, and the service districts are carried through as well. Next slide. The regulating plan identifies the street types, the locations for new streets, if those were part of the original vision, identifies civic sites, identifies, most importantly, the sub-districts, which, allocate density, building types, etc. And this is the key regulatory map to implement the CRA vision. You can see the sub-district legend there. There's the core, which typically follows what was the old mixed-use overlay areas, corridor, which is, like it sounds, the type of uses that you would find along a major corridor like US 1. It's interesting, Hobe Sound is the only CRA that actually has US 1 frontage. So we spent an awful lot of time really pouring through on a lot-by-lot basis what the existing allowed intensities and uses were versus where we were going to go. As we've said before, our mantra is that this is not an effort to go out and upzone folks for no apparent reason. As Irene mentioned, as we start to try to reconcile some imbalances or some boundary inconsistencies between the future land use and the zoning, a parcel that was limited to 5 may go to 8 units per acre, something like that. But we're also loath to take away anybody's existing property rights. To the extent that, we've had a lot of discussions about gas stations and drive-throughs that are currently allowed in US 1, and how do we deal with those going forward? And I'll show you one approach. Next slide, please. So Article 12, as you've seen before, this is the new LDRs for the CRAs. Division 1 has already been adopted. That's the general division. It's sort of the preamble. And all of those elements within Division 1 apply equally throughout all of the CRA areas. Next slide. And then each CRA has its own division within that overall Article 12. So you'll notice, next slide, please. Division 5 is Hobe Sound. Division 2 was Jensen. Division 3 was Rio. Those are fully adopted and effective. Old Palm City, where we need to go back for a second public hearing. And then, of course, we're here at the LPA for Hobe Sound this evening. Next slide. One of the things you might recall that we did in Division 1 is collapse all of the uses into use groups, so that the 148 uses or whatever that are allowed throughout the different CRAs are now able to be expressed, next slide, in a single page within the permitted use table for Hobe Sound. And you'll notice at the top, the sub-districts are listed there: core, general corridor, railroad corridor. We'll talk about that because that's unique to Hobe Sound. And then the use groups that are permitted within those areas. Next slide. Similarly, we've created a development standards table, which is a single page, which, next slide please, identifies some of the key development parameters. So for instance, you'll see the sub-districts listed across the top. And then for instance, in core, what is the allowable density? The allowable density in core is 10 units to the acre. What is the minimum lot size for the detached areas is 2,500 square feet, or a minimum lot width of 25 feet. So, and that's carrying forward what some of the existing regulations are today. Next slide, please. As we've discussed before in the other areas, we are also regulating by building type. So there's a building type matrix that's part of the development standards. Next slide, please. It's at the bottom, and I just highlighted it to make it a bit larger so you could see. And so similarly, like the far right-hand column is detached. And what are the building types that are permitted within detached? Townhouse, cottage types, side yard house, all yard house. It's really limited to single family structures. Whereas in the core, which is the column to the left, almost all of the building types are permitted in core, except for some of the ones that are strictly single family, because you don't want to populate your main street with single family houses typically. So that's how those are regulated, the building types. Next slide. And then we've gone through, and for each of the building types, I know you've seen this before, but we've illustrated them. We've provided a narrative about the purpose and intent of that building type, and also provide its critical dimensions for setbacks, height, etc. Next slide. We also took it a little bit further, and we've got frontage standards or frontage types where we actually provide instructions about the size and scale and depth of critical architectural features like arcades or porches and things of that nature. Next slide. And as you've seen before, there's a series of illustrative street sections. These are provided as guidance going forward. There are, in some of the CRA areas, like in Hobe Sound, the original vision plans identified locations for future streets. So there's a palette of streets to potentially choose from. Obviously, the one on the left, which has a 150-foot right-of-way, wouldn't necessarily apply in a neighborhood. But the one on the right, if I can, is that the Yield Street? I'm sorry, I can't see it from here. That's one we created, and it's actually being implemented in Jensen Beach today, which is a very narrow, very slow speed residential street. Next slide. So the main topic this evening for this agenda item is the request of the adoption or the recommendation moving forward of the adoption for the rezoning for the Hobe Sound CRA, as well as the land development regulations. There are some specific issues, though, that we've been trying to address and that we've unearthed and we discussed with the NAC. So I wanted to be sure to bring those to your attention because I think they're valid, and there has been a very, especially Hobe Sound. Hobe Sound is very interesting. It's, I think, part of it because there's US 1, the highway corridor. There's historic neighborhoods. There's large parcels that span Dixie on one side and Federal on the other. So we really strenuously went lot by lot to review the future land use categories, the existing zoning, and whether or not there are any overlay districts. In some cases, we found zoning categories that are antiquated. So what does that really mean in terms of uses and densities going forward? And in particular, with the corridor and the general sub-districts. Primarily because, as I mentioned, we discovered this snag that gas stations and drive-thrus were permitted. So we didn't want to proliferate those, but we did need to carry forward those existing development rights. So next slide, please. What we did is came up with a whole series of diagrams and instructions for if you are doing a gas station and you have a convenience store, it should be located at the corner or at least against the street. Not unlike the gas station, if you're familiar with it on Map Road in Old Palm City, where the convenience portion of that has been brought forward. And so there's a bit of urbanism and activity at the street. It's not just your typical gas station that's a huge surface lot. Also, drive-throughs, you know, they can be handled in lots of different ways architecturally that can be very, very useful. So we've provided some of those instructions, and particularly in the few cases where there's an alleyway, those should definitely be used, you know, to access driveways. Excuse me, access drive-throughs. Next slide, please. So I wanted to show you two examples of how we went through and analyzed the existing land uses and the existing zoning and how we were going to move forward, and how we had to also use, I think, our best planning judgment in some cases. So, for example, this is Petway. If you can point out the Petway Street there. Petway and Gomez, it's a Habitat for Humanity project that's underway. On the left is the medium density future land use designations that exist today. And on the right is the R3AC zoning and RS6 zoning. The C zoning is one of the ones that you would have to rezone from, I believe, right? So it's one of the older zoning categories. So the zoning would refer to, in this case, the future land use, the category C. The future land use is medium density, which allows 8 units per acre. But when you go to the next slide, you look at the context of what's out there, it's predominantly single family, medium to large size lots. So next slide. What we propose then there, instead of a detached sub-district, which would allow for and accommodate more single family fabric, you know, similar to what's being built out there today. Now, a comparable situation, if you go to the next slide, please. Here you've got areas very similar, medium future land use designation on the left and the R3AC zoning on the right. Again, the zoning would defer to the future land use, which allows 8 units to the acre, but this context is very different where it allows, go next slide please. There's a tremendous number of, most of it is duplex, yeah, in the entire area. So next slide. So in this case, we gave it a multifamily zoning subdistrict. And those are, we wanted to just point that out because you start with the same future land use and the same existing zoning in both of those cases, but we ended up with different results because of trying to maintain the context of what's on the ground. And that's been so important going through this whole effort. Next slide, please. One of the things that the regulating plan does that I mentioned is identify civic sites. So you see the red stars that are there. And we think this is important, even though it's illustrative and it's not providing like any regulatory information about the civic sites. But, you know, it's always nice for if somebody's sniffing around looking for property to develop that there's not a mistake made that, oh my gosh, we lost our civic building somehow through, you know, purchase and redevelopment. So it also just gives context and guidance, I think, to, in particular in Hobe Sound, because there's so many of them. You know, it shows a richness of the character of the area. Next slide. So one of the things that, and Irene pointed this out, I think, we've had just innumerable staff meetings going through each of these CRA areas. But in this particular case, there are the properties that are on the east side of Southeast Dixie Highway. And when you look at it from the air, you think, okay, well, that would be sort of, you know, part of our main street, but it's on the other side of the tracks, really facing Shell Ave, excuse me. And when you look at it on the ground, next slide, please, there's predominantly business uses. There's one single family house that's there. So do you mind going backwards one, please? We really didn't have a sub-district. You know, the first thought was, well, should we make this industrial? And we're like, no, we don't want to do that because that would not be really within the character of the area. So we actually created a new sub-district for Hobe Sound called Railroad Corridor, which allows those businesses to exist, but it also allows single family to exist there too, which is something that we don't allow in industrial. So I just wanted to point that out because it is a unique condition to Hobe Sound. Next slide, please. Next one. Now, this is important. Irene pointed this out. Not really sure why, but when the original mixed-use overlay was outlined for Hobe Sound, this was its original configuration. And you'll notice that it did not include the Winn-Dixie Shopping Center. We felt from the very beginning that that parcel or a series of parcels needed to be included in the town center or the core sub-district because it represents the single largest redevelopment opportunity in Hobe Sound. And you want to provide as much predictability for that and continuity with what is really your main street, Bridge Road. Next slide, please. And so, oh, I'm sorry, go back one quickly. And currently, you're allowed to do up to 10 dwelling units per acre within that red area. Next slide. So we expanded that area to include the Winn-Dixie site. And then when we were at the NAC a couple of weeks ago, we brought to their attention that we were recommending that the entire area be allowed to go up to 15 units per acre versus the 10 that exist today. And the reason for that is that Hobe Sound, for whatever reason, its original mixed-use overlay area is the only CRA that limits the density within the Main Street area to 10. All of the other CRAs are allowed to go up to 15 within that core designation. So we had, I think, a healthy and robust discussion about that. But the NAC really, for the most, well, they voted unanimously to oppose that. They want to keep it at 10 units per the acre today. We had offered to do an additional presentation or provide additional slides just to show what the character might be. And also we wanted to bring it up because we don't want Hobe Sound to be at a disadvantage to the other CRAs where they might be able to get a little bit more density in their core versus the 10 units per acre here. But after a lot of discussion, the NAC just wasn't comfortable with it. So even though their chair supported it, I think, and there were people in the community that supported going to 15 units per acre, they voted unanimously to keep it at 10. So that's what we're bringing forward. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. I noticed on the second slide that you removed that railroad corridor. Was that just simply because you redesignated it? Between the previous slide and this one, that whole section was removed.
Go back. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I
That's
just want to make
correct.
sure it was just a redesignation.
Yes, no, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, because it didn't make sense over there.
Right.
You know, that's not really sort of part of your urban fabric, if you will. So we're carrying forward the NAC's recommendation of keeping it at 10 dwelling units to the acre. Next slide. Now this is interesting. Building heights are kind of all over the place in Hobe Sound. You'll see along Bridge Road, on the north side of Bridge Road, and at 2 intersections on the south side, you're allowed to do currently 3 stories and 35 feet. Along Federal Highway, in some places, you're allowed to do 2 stories and 40 feet. We're not exactly sure why. And then for the rest of Bridge Road and Dixie, you're allowed to do 2 stories and 35 feet. And then within the neighborhood, Zeus Park and Banner Lake, you're allowed to do 30 feet and 2 stories. So we focus primarily on, number one, not taking away anybody's development rights to allow them up to 30 feet or 2 stories, but in particular with regard to the core area, next slide please, of allowing 3 stories throughout. Next, keep going, I forget, yeah, next slide. Those are the existing, next slide. Sorry, normally I just blaze through these. Next slide. So what we recommended was that, again, being consistent with the other CRAs, that the core area, the core subdistrict, allow 3 stories and up to 40 feet. Now, 40 feet is the absolute maximum building height in Martin County. However, 3 stories and 35 feet, you might get sort of marginalized floor-to-ceiling heights. And so, this is what we've done in the other CRAs, so again, to be consistent. And the NAC supported this. They did not have an issue with that at all. Next slide, please. There's also a 2-block area, next slide, please, 3-block area of required commercial frontage that we're recommending. That means that you have to have commercial uses on the ground floor, and that's to maintain, the historic sort of Main Street pattern there. Next slide. And this was an issue that was brought up actually at the first NAC meeting, and I think it's really good that it came up. We're going to go back. We're currently doing research on this now with other cities. Next slide, please. But when you're talking about doing urban buildings, party wall condition, or building out your main street, there's information and there are challenges to doing urban type of construction that you don't normally have in a suburban environment. Like for instance, this came up because one property owner happened to find out that the parcel next to them, a new building was coming in, very nice building. But it turns out they were building on their property line, which they were allowed to, and they were overhanging into the neighbor's property. So they were encroaching the airspace of the neighbor. Number one. Number two, they're also throwing water off into the property. Number three, because their site plan didn't identify the existing adjacent building, they didn't realize how close it was. So all of these issues have come up about application requirements, maintenance easements. Like if I'm building on my property line, I need to use my neighbor's property to access for construction, for stucco, window installations, whatever it might be. Neighbor notification is a key thing. So we're going through and putting together a punch list of these items that we think are going to be important as part of the application requirements that would go into Division 1. So that, for instance, construction staging. If you've got a 50 by 100 foot deep lot and you're allowed to build, an urban building from property line to property line, where do you store all your materials while you're building the building? What is the maintenance of traffic? Where are all your construction workers going to park? We want to get these things resolved beforehand because otherwise they're going to, prove to be challenges going forward. So we're still working on that. Next slide, please. Next slide. And that completes my presentation. Again, our request this evening is respectfully that you move forward the LDRs and the rezoning to the Board of County Commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
No, covered it all.
Not for me.
Mr. Foley, any questions for the presentation?
No. Mr. Little covered everything that I had questions with. I'm glad to see that the NAC did hold that to 10 units per acre. That would have been my vote also.
I'm a little curious about the section of A1A that has parking on both sides of the easement and whether that is part of the buildable streetscape. Right now, it's used for all manner of things, and I just wasn't sure how that was going to go in the future.
The frontage road?
The frontage road, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's part of the public right of way. Yeah, no, that's not buildable area.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's a very unique and special condition that you have there, that you definitely want to keep. We're always recommending the frontage roads. They're
Good.
fantastic, yeah.
I guess the other question was that years ago, there was issue between the mixed-use overlay and Zeus Park and some of those properties that were actually, in both sections. Has the new sort of boundary line for the urban center been completely on the Bridge Road side or completely on the Zeus Park side? Are
So-
those issues still existing?
What, you went past it?
I did.
Yeah. Okay, that shows it. So I don't have a pointer, forgive me, but you'll notice that the properties that face Dixie, they actually back up to an alleyway. Those were originally in the mixed-use overlay, so they remain in the core sub-district. Now, what's happened in Zeus Park is that, there are a couple of, there's actually, go 1 block west, Susan, along Plutus. There's actually 2 parcels, 2 buildings that are businesses along that road today. And not to mention, there's also, some, I think it's I forget the zoning, but this is an area where there's a bit of a conflict, where you've got low-density future land use today, and in some cases, you've got a business zoning district. I forget which one it is. B1. Where there were existing businesses today, we kept it as general sub-districts so that they're not, non-conformities going forward. But the others, where there is not businesses there today, we kept it as multifamily in that area because it allows townhouses, which is consistent with the density, but it wouldn't allow businesses in that case. Do you know what I mean? So we try to, that's a funny little area there. Try to navigate that so that we, like I said before, we're not putting anybody's existing business in jeopardy, but we're also not trying to proliferate businesses within the neighborhood.
And I guess the other question I had earlier was, there was some conversation further in the properties between A1A and Federal Highway or US 1. There was the multifamily trailer park between two business uses.
Right.
How does that now zone compared to the property to the north? And I just want to make sure that we're not creating another problem.
Susan,
with
can you back up?
inconsistency.
Yeah, to the overall regulating plan. Okay.
Does this show it?
You'll have to remind me exactly, no, that was good.
Well, Irene actually used it as an example.
Right.
And it's not all the way up to Peltway, but it's North Church Street, right.
But you see, basically, there are gray areas that are mobile home sub-districts.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's not a mobile home future land use category, but we created a sub-district for mobile homes to protect those going forward.
Okay, so multifamily will be permitted in mobile home according to that zoning?
I'd have to go back and look at the development standards. I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me. Go ahead. Go ahead.
In the mobile home zoning sub-district, you're permitted to have mobile homes, you're permitted to have modular homes. Of course, that's consistent with what's there now. You're also permitted to have a detached single-family dwelling. Currently, in the mobile home future land use designation and in the 2 current mobile home zoning districts, you can only build a site-built house if you're homesteaded. That you own the mobile home and you're homesteaded. But that also got a lot of discussion, and we concluded that we should permit people to build modest site-built structures in the mobile home sub-district,
But not multifamily.
not apartment buildings,
Okay.
not townhouses, not duplexes.
So on that example of Church Street that you gave us before, what was the middle section going to be designated as?
In terms of the future land use, it was general commercial, bookends,
Right.
and mobile home in the middle.
Right.
Future land use designations, that did not represent the current uses. And the whole area, that little strip, became CRA Center future land use. And I'm not sure where it is on that map.
Well, I guess that's why I'm asking.
It's north of Church.
Here's
I believe
Church.
it became general.
Here's church.
Yeah, so it became the general,
You have to
except.
back up to the mic.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to see.
Except for
It,
this.
it became, just, there's a little bit of corridor
Yeah.
on US 1,
General.
and that's because it was a general commercial future land use with a general commercial zoning. That's what became corridor, and then the rest became general. General permits detached, single-family. It also permits some commercial uses and perhaps some other use. Right, I would have to look at the permitted use table also.
So for instance, in that section that Irene was just describing, general permits, business and professional offices, construction services limited. It's consistent with core in some ways, but the corridor type, the pink one, is the one that allows even more uses that are consistent with the US 1 corridor. And again, we analyzed those to make sure that we weren't dropping anything off. And what I mean by that is that we weren't prohibiting someone tomorrow from being able to do what they could do today. Even if we didn't really like it, in some cases, like, there's been a lot of discussions, new drive-throughs and, Wawas and things
Right.
like that. So, but we were very careful to carry those forward.
I guess the other side of that, however, is, if we're looking for affordability, it may be that the mobile home designation, and there's a lot of it here, is really providing about the only resource for that lower income level that we've got. And I'm just not sure whether we're being completely fair if we give a core designation to an area and we're not permitting some of the other uses that we allow in core.
Well, we're not taking away any of the mobile home areas.
Right.
And in fact, Hobe Sound, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is one of the few of the CRAs where we carried forward the mobile home.
No,
Designation, yeah.
I think that's true,
Yeah.
as far as I can tell, but there's also a lot of them there.
Yes, yes. And they're intact and they're defined. Old Palm City, we had this conversation, Port Salerno, we had this conversation quite a bit because there are mobile home, areas that are designated mobile homes but have a lot of single family that's scattered in there. And so we're trying to mitigate that issue there as well. And then there's the existing rules, as Irene pointed out, where currently today you cannot build a site-built single-family house on a mobile home lot that has a mobile home designation unless it's homesteaded. And that was to prevent speculation, into the future. So I think we feel pretty good about the approach to mobile homes here in Hobe Sound, understanding exactly your point.
Anything else? I appreciate all your effort.
Thank you very much.
I really do. I think that,
Your public comment?
that it does make more sense.
Mr. Chair, there is one public comment came in via email.
Sure. Would you like to read it out loud?
Sure. It was addressed to Dana Little. Hello, Dana. Hope everyone is well. I have been reviewing the draft of the Hobe Sound regulating plan that is on tomorrow night's LPA agenda, and while most of it looks great, we have a number of concerns related to our clients' 13 through 15 acres on the west side of US 1 and just south of Bridge Road. It is still an active application in the county, although on hold based on significant stormwater issues from Banner Lake. The future streets shown on the regulating plan and defined on page 27 do not reflect the desire of the Banner Lake residents, who we met with 3 times, and does not reflect the stormwater and upland preserve issues found on the site. The NAC reviewed this plan and I believe approved it prior to the stormwater issue. Meeting the standards described in the future streets requirements could prove very difficult and clearly don't reflect the site plan, which is showing connectivity on the north and onto US 1 from the Pine School. Thanks, best regards, Michael Houston.
So the area that, that they're referring to, can you point that out on the left map there, Susan, please? Right there.
So it's west of Harry the Natives, but not,
Correct.
okay.
And currently, it's vacant land. For whatever reason, the existing streets of Banner Lake did not extend to US 1. Mr. Houston called me this morning, and we discussed this. And what you see in the regulating plan are those dashed lines for potential future, proposed streets. I explained to him that those are there as reference from the original Hobe Sound vision plan, because at the time that was created, the idea was to reconnect the neighborhood going through. The proposed plan that Mr. Houston's representing, I think it dates back to 2015. It's a number of years old, and I don't believe it has any approvals yet. And so I just informed him that, this was representing the vision from the vision plan. That's consistent with our methodology for all of the other CRAs. And, it's going to be up to him and his team to make the arguments against doing that level of connectivity with the neighborhood. So I don't know what the status of the plan is now, but we told him that we would bring up these concerns this evening.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman. Paul Schilling, Growth Management. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. The project, I believe that Mr. Houston and the name escapes me. It is called Hobe Sound Village, I believe. Went through several rounds of review several years ago, and then kind of just stopped for a variety of reasons, one of which was stormwater management and so forth and so on. So it has no current approval or any valid development order, as Mr. Little said. So we have not seen an application or a resubmittal for years. So.
And just to clarify, Clyde Doolan just brought this up. I mean, just to clarify, the proposed alignment for future streets, they're not regulatory. They are not required. However, we carry them forward because they, as I said, they've been part of the community vision for 20 years. And I think that while you're not mandated to do that as a development project, as a development approval, I do think it's incumbent upon an applicant to explain why they're not, And Mr. Houston explained that they've got tremendous on-site stormwater requirements there, and there's a lot of there's a lot of factors that would have to be addressed in a resubmittal of the project. But he just wanted to point that out, that what we have on the plan is not consistent with what they've designed, and so we just brought that forward.
Have you encountered that a lot, where things have gone through the NAC, met with some level of approval, and there is an understanding that those negotiated agreements are, now somewhat in the air? But does that happen? I mean, I would imagine that the CRAs have been going on for, like you say, 20 years, and there's probably quite a few plans that haven't, come to fruition.
Mr. Chairman, can I just distinguish something you said?
Yeah.
So certainly from a regulatory or legal perspective, the submittal of a site plan application that has not gone through to any level of either coming to the local planning agency at a minimum or beyond, so without any approvals, that's certainly something that is a consideration and would be evaluated as these plans are moving forward, because as Mr. Little said, we've been very conscious of existing property rights represented by, existing site plans or some level of approval or something such as that. So recognizing that, yes, there was efforts in the past. Sometimes people come and submit. The county has a pre-application process, and sometimes those go forward beyond that one meeting, and sometimes they don't, or people submit and they don't move forward. And not to diminish anyone's rights, but on the other hand, as there's an attempt to make some planning decisions and move forward for the benefit of the community, if there's no approvals in place, that's a fact.
It's a moot point at that point.
That's
Yeah, correct.
right. Yes, correct. Thanks. So.
What I'll add to this is one of the issues that I believe we're going to face is that some aspects of the new proposals are very beneficial to developers, or make, and perhaps the community, give a lot more flexibility. For example, Chapter 18 provides that the density transition policies of comp plan do not apply in the CRAs. That policy doesn't take effect. No, it might be in effect. I'd have to read. What I was going to say is I don't think that policy takes effect until you go through this, each CRA goes through this process and adopts a CRA redevelopment zoning district and these sub-districts and these codes. So some projects will benefit substantially from that. On the other hand, we codified in no uncertain terms that in the CRAs, you're not allowed to gate your streets. You're not allowed to gate your streets. Connectivity and neighborliness, like a high degree of connectivity, is an essential part of the compact, walkable urban form that we're trying to accomplish. So whether we might have someone trying to use parts of the old code and parts of the new code, and I think we'll probably see that. In these LDRs, we have provided that applications that have been submitted prior to the effective date can move forward under the previously effective code. The idea is maybe you'll choose. You're either going forward under the old code or you're going forward under the new code, not potluck.
Mm-hmm.
That would be applicable to applications that have a status of their current, because the code does require that if you come in and submit, there's a time period for submittal and review comments by staff, and then the applicant has an obligation to respond in a certain period of time. And so at some point in time, your application is in a sense void because you haven't moved forward. So, but applications, what we'll call actual, real in progress applications that are meeting their timeframes, yes, that's what Irene was referring to, and that's only fair.
Do you have another point?
No, I'm sorry. I was smiling because I was wiping off the microphone. No offense.
All right.
I've become paranoid. Yeah.
I want to see.
Of all of us.
Yeah.
Nice work.
Yeah.
Ready to.
It's interesting not to have face masks and all of the proper PPE on. It's a new world. Any comments, observations,
No, like I said,
questions?
just very-
Mr. Foley, do you have
detailed.
anything
Well
you'd like
done.
to add, or?
No, he's covered. I mean, they've gone into this in detail, quite a lot of detail, and covered any questions that I've had. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. Any questions, Scott? Nope. Okay. So we're looking for a motion to move this forward to the Board of County Commissioners.
So moved.
Second.
And we have a motion, and we have a second. So Mr. Flanagan made the motion, Mr. Watson seconded. Mr. Foley, you ready for a vote?
Yes, sir.
All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much for all your efforts. Do we have a date for the next?
So your next meeting would have been in 2 weeks, and you don't have any items. I think, so today's the 2nd, it would have been April 16th. So the next meeting is for, I believe, May 7th.
Right.
And we do have some items. And so we'll see how we meet.
And hopefully we're all free by then.
Well, the assumption is it will be free, but
You're right. So anyway, and again, we appreciate your indulgence and everyone's participation in our,
I see a heck of a job. You guys are really, I know what a nightmare it is to try to put stuff together. Oh my gosh. I mean, really,
I
you've
think,
done an
I
awesome
think all the
job.
staff for being so, on it. And this seems to work out relatively well.
Very accommodating
Yeah.
under the circumstances.
okay.
And I hope everybody stays.
And if I could
safe and
interject,
healthy.
I'd like to thank everyone for giving me the opportunity to participate in the meeting from my home under the circumstances. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay.
Please stay safe. Please stay healthy.
Okay. Thank you all. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
You want to adjourn?
Sure.
I move.